My name is Brielle, and I'm 29 years old, and this story began with an old, dust-covered typewriter that changed everything. I've always loved words. The way they can hurt, heal, or haunt, long after they're spoken. But I never thought words could kill. That was before the typewriter came into my life. When my grandfather passed away, he left me three things: his watch, a stack of faded newspaper clippings, and an old black Remington typewriter. It was heavy, the kind of machine that looked like it had seen decades of stories and secrets. I remember staring at it as a child, fascinated by how the keys looked like little teeth ready to bite into paper. Back then, it was just a relic. Now, it's something far more sinister. I'm a freelance writer, not a very successful one, if I'm being honest. I spend most of my days at a small café in town, sipping cold coffee and typing short stories that hardly anyone reads. The regulars know me as the girl with the typewriter, even though most writers I know use sleek laptops or tablets. I guess I liked the nostalgia of it, the sound of the keys, the weight of each word. But not everyone found it charming. My coworkers at the cafe often mocked me for it. "What is this, the 1,950 seconds?" They'd laugh. "You expecting Hemingway to walk in?" Even Harper, my best friend since college, used to tease me, though hers was more playful. Still, after months of being the joke, I started feeling small. Like my passion was just another thing for people to laugh at. One evening, after closing time, I stayed behind to finish a short story. The cafe was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the tapping of the rain outside. I was halfway through a sentence when I heard a sound, faint, rhythmic. It wasn't coming from the rain. It was coming from the typewriter. At first, I thought maybe a key had jammed or a spring had loosened. But the sound was deliberate, steady. Like someone typing very slowly. I leaned closer, heart thudding. And then I saw it. The carriage shifted slightly to the left. The paper rolled upward, and on the blank sheet appeared a single word: "Hello." I froze. My first thought was that someone was playing a prank on me. Maybe one of the baristas had set up some mechanical trick earlier. But no, I was alone. The cafe was locked. And that typewriter hadn't been plugged into anything in its entire lifetime. I laughed nervously, brushing it off as a coincidence. "Okay," I muttered to the empty room. "Cute." Still, curiosity got the better of me. I slipped another sheet of paper into the roller and, half joking, typed, "Who are you?" I waited a few minutes, then packed up and went home, convincing myself it was just an odd mechanical glitch. Old machines can do weird things when dust settles in them. But the next morning, when I walked into the cafe and set up for the day, I noticed something strange. The page I'd left in the typewriter was no longer blank. The typewriter had moved slightly on its own, the paper crooked in the roller, the ink faintly smudged. My stomach dropped when I saw what it had written. Right beneath my question, "Who are you?" were two words in bold, heavy strokes, as if someone had slammed the keys with force. You. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, my hands trembling slightly. It didn't make sense. Machines didn't just wake up overnight and start answering questions, but there it was, a word typed in fresh ink, darker than anything I'd written yesterday. "Okay," I whispered, forcing a shaky laugh. "This is insane." For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. Every time I looked at the typewriter, I half expected it to start typing again. Customers came and went, the smell of espresso filled the air, and the chatter around me felt distant. I was distracted, obsessed. Almost. When Harper stopped by later, I told her about it, half expecting her to laugh. "Brielle," she said, smirking. "Maybe your typewriter's just lonely." "Maybe," I said. Though deep down, I didn't believe it. There was something off about the whole thing. That night, I brought the typewriter home with me. I told myself I wanted to clean it, maybe oil the keys, make it look nice again. But truthfully, I couldn't leave it alone. Something about that "you" felt personal. I set it on my writing desk by the window, the moonlight glinting off its metal frame. I sat there for a while, just staring. Then, unable to help myself, I loaded a fresh sheet of paper and typed, "What do you mean, you?" The typewriter didn't move. No sound. Nothing. I sighed and went to bed, feeling foolish for even asking. But the next morning, I woke to the sound of soft tapping. My heart raced as I stepped into the living room. The typewriter sat on my desk, paper filled halfway down the page. The words were crooked, uneven, like someone typing in a hurry. I moved closer to read what it said. "Hello, Bree." I froze. No one called me Bree except Harper and my grandfather. I hadn't typed that nickname anywhere. The rest of the line was faint, the ink barely visible. I leaned closer to read it. "You still write too much." I dropped the page and stumbled backward. My mouth went dry. That was exactly what my grandfather used to tell me when I'd filled journals as a kid. But he was gone. And yet, someone, or something, was still talking to me through his old typewriter. I laughed it off at first, thinking I was overtired or going crazy. That's what I told myself the next morning as I poured coffee into a chipped mug and stared at the typewriter across the room. The page from last night sat half-rolled in the machine, the words faint but undeniably real. I had reread them at least 10 times. "Hello, Bri. You still write too much." Every letter looked pressed with purpose. The strokes strong, the spacing consistent. Not like a malfunction like intention. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had written it in my sleep. Maybe I was more stressed than I realized. Maybe grief was finally catching up with me. After all, I hadn't really processed losing my grandfather. I'd buried myself in work, in meaningless stories, in anything that kept me from thinking too much. Still, that morning, I grabbed my bag and told myself I'd leave the typewriter alone. No more messages. No more staring. Just coffee, customers, and normalcy. At the café, I tried bringing it up casually to Harper as we cleaned the espresso machine. "You ever had something weird happen with an old thing?" I asked, pretending to sound casual. She raised a brow. "Like what?" I hesitated. "Like it moving on its own?" Harper laughed. "Bree, are you seriously asking me if your haunted typewriter's acting up again?" Her tone was playful, but I heard the mockery in it. I forced a chuckle. "Yeah, it's nothing. Just thought I saw it type something again." She nudged me with her elbow. "You need sleep. Maybe lay off the late-night writing marathons. You're starting to sound like one of your stories." We both laughed, but mine was hollow. Later, when our coworker Alina overheard, she jumped into the conversation. "A haunted typewriter? Oh, that's cute," she said with a smirk. "Maybe your grandpa's ghost wants an editor credit." The other baristas chuckled. I smiled weakly and excused myself to the back, pretending to organize supplies. Their laughter followed me, echoing in my head long after. That night, I came home to my apartment, still irritated. I decided to prove to myself, to everyone, that it was nothing. I unplugged my lamp, turned off every light except one, and locked the typewriter in my bedroom closet. Then I sat on the couch with my laptop, writing an article I owed a client. The soft hum of the fridge was the flight, only sound. Midnight came and went. I yawned, closed my laptop, and leaned back. Maybe Harper was right. Maybe I was imagining everything. Then I heard it. A slow, deliberate click. Clack. Click. The sound was faint at first, like a whisper from behind a wall. Then it grew louder, sharper, rhythmic, coming from the bedroom. My heart started pounding. I stood frozen for a moment, debating whether to even check. When I finally did, my hands trembled as I reached for the closet handle. The moment I opened the door, the sound stopped. The typewriter sat on the top shelf where I'd left it, perfectly still. A faint smell of old paper filled the air. Then, without warning, the carriage snapped to the left, hard enough to make me jump. And the typing began again. The keys struck one by one, slow and deliberate. The paper rolled upward, revealing a single word in the center of the page. "Listen." My knees nearly buckled. I stepped closer, whispering, "Listen to what?" For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, almost like it had heard me, the typewriter resumed typing. The letters appeared shakily this time. Uneven. "I know them." I blinked. "Who?" I asked out loud, my voice shaking. No response. Just silence until the machine twitched violently, its metal keys clattering all at once like a burst of applause. When it stopped, the paper rolled again, and the new words appeared slowly. "They laugh at you." I stumbled backward, clutching my mouth. My mind flashed to Harper, to Elena, to everyone at the café who'd smirked or whispered behind my back. The room felt smaller, the shadows thicker. I could hear my pulse in my ears. It couldn't be real. It couldn't. I ripped the page out of the roller and tore it in half, then in half again, until it was nothing but scraps. The typewriter sat there, silent now, almost smug. I whispered, "Stop this. Please, just stop." I unplugged every lamp, switched off the lights, and left the room, shutting the door behind me. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence felt heavy, oppressive. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that I was imagining it, projecting stress into something supernatural. Then I heard a soft ding, the sound that typewriters make when they reach the end of a line. I froze. It came from the other side of the wall, from my bedroom. I squeezed my eyes shut, telling myself not to move. Don't look, don't feed it. But curiosity, or maybe fear, won. I got up and opened the door. The typewriter's carriage had reset itself. A fresh page sat in the roller. I took one step closer, and the single word typed at the top of the page made every hair on my body stand on end. Run. That's when the fear started to mix with something darker, curiosity. Sleep became impossible after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear the faint echo of the typewriter's bell, that sharp metallic ding that signaled an end and a beginning all at once. Even when I covered my ears, it was there, faint but persistent, like it had burrowed its way into my thoughts. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the torn scraps of paper I'd thrown away. The word "run" was still visible on a few of them. I should have thrown them out completely. I should have burned them. But instead, I found myself piecing them together like a puzzle, as though the answer to what was happening might be hidden between the creases. I kept asking myself one question: how could it know? The typewriter had said, "They laugh at you." And it was true. Harper had laughed. Elena had laughed. Even my boss had made snide jokes about my retro aesthetic. The thought made my stomach twist. Maybe that was the point. Maybe whatever was behind that typewriter fed on humiliation, on insecurity, on resentment. And yet, even through the fear, I wanted to understand. I couldn't just ignore something that seemed to know me so intimately. That afternoon, I sat down at my computer and began to research. I found old articles about typewriters being haunted or spirit-bound. I thought they were silly, urban legends meant to scare children, but now, I read every word with trembling hands. One thread in an old online forum caught my eye. A user named Inkstain47 had written, "Objects that channel words often carry the spirit of unfinished stories. They don't haunt, they continue." I reread that line over and over. Unfinished stories. My grandfather had been a journalist. He'd spent his career exposing corruption in small-town politics. He'd received threats. I'd heard that much from my mother. He'd died peacefully in his sleep. Or so everyone said. But what if his stories hadn't truly ended? I decided to ask the typewriter. That evening, I placed a fresh sheet of paper in the roller and sat before it like it was an oracle. I sat there in silence, waiting, every tick of the clock stretching endlessly. Then, just as I started to get up, the carriage jerked slightly to the left, and the typewriter began to move. Letter by letter, it typed, "No." My heart dropped. I swallowed hard and asked, "Then who are you?" The keys hesitated before responding, "Someone who knows." I stared at the words. "Knows what?" This time, it took longer to reply. Then, with deliberate slowness, it wrote, "They mock you. They hurt you. I can help." The last 3 words, "I can help," sent a chill through me. I didn't know if it was threatening me or protecting me, but part of me wanted to believe it. The next morning at the café, I couldn't stop thinking about what it said. "Hey, you bring your ghostwriter with you today?" I forced a smile, pretending not to care, but something deep in my chest stirred something raw and ugly. I wanted her to stop laughing. Just stop. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the typewriter again. I didn't want to talk to it. I told myself not to, but I couldn't resist. I pressed one key, then another. I typed, "Why do you want to help me?" The response came instantly, as if it had been waiting for me to ask. "Because they deserve it." "Who?" I asked aloud. The typewriter didn't hesitate. "Elena." I froze. "What about her?" The carriage slid violently to the left, slamming against the edge with a loud clack. Then it typed again, faster this time, as if with anger. "She mocked you. She'll pay." I felt the air grow heavy. My hands trembled as I reached for the sheet, pulling it out and crumpling it. "No," I whispered. "This isn't funny." I shoved the typewriter away and turned off the light. But as I crawled into bed, I couldn't stop thinking about those words. She'll pay. The next morning, I arrived at the café to find everyone huddled near the counter, whispering. My boss, Mark, looked pale. "Did you hear?" he asked when he saw me. "Hear what?" "It's Elena. She was in an accident last night. Car crash. Total wreck." My stomach dropped. "Is she?" "She's alive," he said. "But she's in the hospital. Broke her arm. Concussion. Said her brakes failed out of nowhere." I tried to respond, but the words caught in my throat. My hands went cold. All I could think about was the typewriter. The message. "She'll pay." That night, I didn't touch it. I didn't even go near my desk. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting for me, patient and alive in the darkness. I turned on the TV to drown out the silence, but my mind kept replaying every letter it had typed, every laugh that had ever cut too deep, every insult that had left a mark. Somewhere between guilt and fear, another thought crept in, something small, poisonous, and tempting. Maybe it wasn't hurting people. Maybe it was just setting things right. I didn't know it then, but the typewriter had already started writing the next name. I should have stopped then, but I didn't. The morning after, the accident felt like the world was moving through molasses. I woke with my phone buzzing in my hand and my heart already lodged somewhere high in my throat. The cafe felt different the moment I stepped through the door, quieter, somehow thinner, as if a laugh had been cut out of the air. Mark met me at the counter, his face drained of color. "Elena's not coming in today," he said before I could ask. "Car accident last night. Brakes failed." The words landed like pebbles sinking in cold water. I fumbled for a response. "Is she okay?" I managed. "She's going to be fine," he said. "Broken arm. Concussion. She's lucky." Lucky. The word felt like an accusation aimed squarely at me. Lucky that she lived, lucky that it wasn't worse, lucky that the typewriter hadn't done more. I should have breathed a sigh of relief and let the day move on, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. My chest felt constricted by a small iron cage of guilt. I pictured the keys striking paper in my dim apartment, my own hands nowhere near the machine. Coincidence, I told myself. A horrible, inconvenient coincidence. Still, when I closed my eyes that night, I saw the letters the typewriter had formed the night before. Elena. She'll pay. Those words had weight. They didn't just predict, they promised. I told myself to throw it out. I imagined wringing the typewriter's neck, tossing it in a dumpster, watching it clatter and die. Instead, I carried it downstairs and shoved it into the back of my closet, the same way I'd tried to hide embarrassment or grief all my life. I told Harper about it because she was the one person whose opinion mattered enough to sting. She listened, silent at first, and then she put her hand on my arm like she always had when I was on the edge of something. "You need to get rid of it," she said quietly. "Whatever that thing is, Bree, it's not helping you. It's not justice, it's danger." I could see the fear in her eyes, a fear I recognized because I felt it in my bones. But there was another feeling tangled with it, a small, sticky relief that someone else finally admitted the thing was wrong. I clung to that relief like a life raft. "I will," I promised, though even as I said it, I knew I might be lying. Promise had always been easier to make than to keep. That night, I pulled apart the typewriter like a surgeon operating on an animal breathing fire. I pried the ribbon free, snipped it into pieces, and shoved each scrap into a glass jar. I thought if I removed the ink, the voice would go silent. I wrapped the machine with an old sheet, tied it with twine, and slid it into the deepest corner of the closet. For the first time in days, I slept without the sound of typing in my ears. Morning arrived like a dare. I padded into the living room on legs that felt borrowed and opened the closet expecting inertia, emptiness, a finality I could trust. The sheet lay folded where I left it. The twine was intact. My hands were steady for the first time in weeks as I pulled the fabric away. The typewriter sat there exactly as I'd left it, but the ribbon was back in place, wound neatly around the spools as if nothing had been done to it. I stared so long my eyes watered. The jar of shredded ribbon sat on the floor where I'd tossed it, lid still sealed, paper shards visible through the glass. I picked it up with a hand that trembled like a phone on vibrate. The lid was cold and tight. The shards inside were unchanged. The typewriter's carriage clicked once, small and deliberate, and a fresh sheet of paper slid into the roller though my hand had not touched it. My breath left me in a sound that could have been a laugh or a sob. I reached toward the page as if it might explode. The keys moved, slow at first, then with a certainty that made my throat burn. Each letter punched the paper with a small, emphatic violence. "You're welcome." The sentence hung there like smoke. I read it again because I thought seeing it twice would change it. It didn't. My mouth tasted like pennies. "What do you want from me?" I whispered to the empty apartment. To the ghost of my grandfather. To whatever logic had abandoned me. The typewriter hummed, tiny and patient, then typed another word that seemed to fill the room with a presence I could neither see nor ignore. Justice. I didn't believe in ghosts before now, I wasn't so sure. After that, the air in my apartment changed. It was thicker, heavier, like the oxygen itself didn't trust me anymore. Every time I looked at that typewriter, I could feel it watching me. Not in a supernatural glowing eyes sort of way, but in the quiet, suffocating way guilt watches you when you're trying to pretend you're innocent. I tried to keep living normally. I went to work, made coffee, wrote freelance articles, smiled at customers, laughed when Harper stopped by. But under it all, I was unraveling. There was a static under my skin I couldn't shake. The word justice kept echoing in my head. The typewriter had chosen that word deliberately. Justice for what? For who? He'd been a hard man, but honest. A journalist who'd spent years writing about things people didn't want written about. Corrupt officials, criminal rings, even local police misconduct. My mother always said he'd made powerful enemies. He couldn't stop himself. She used to sigh. He believed words were weapons. Maybe that was true. Maybe that's why he loved that typewriter so much. He said it was the only tool that never lied. But what if it had learned to fight for him, even after he was gone? I decided to dig into his past. Maybe the machine wasn't haunted by him exactly, maybe it carried his unfinished battles. I went to my mother's house the next day, pretending I just wanted to visit. She wasn't much of a talker, but when I asked about Grandpa's last years, she softened a little. "He was working on a story when he died," she said, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. "Said it was his most important one, but after he passed, all his notes disappeared. We thought maybe he burned them. Do you know what the story was about?" I asked. She frowned, thinking. Something about a man named Rayburn, I think. A local official. He used to come by the house once or twice. Always left angry. The name meant nothing to me. But the way she said it with hesitation, like she still feared it, made my skin prickle. When I got home that night, I couldn't help myself. I fed a new sheet into the typewriter and typed, "Who is Rayburn?" Nothing. Silence. I waited. My heartbeat counted the seconds. Then, faintly, the machine came to life. BAD, man. I felt my stomach twist. I typed again. "Did he hurt you?" "Hurt him." I froze. "You mean my grandfather?" Then, one letter at a time, it typed, "He died for truth." I could feel the room getting colder, as if the air itself was tightening around me. I didn't know if I was talking to my grandfather's ghost, or something older, darker, feeding on his unfinished anger. But I couldn't stop. I typed again. "What do you want from me?" "Finish it." I pulled my hands away like I'd touched fire. I didn't want to finish anything. I wanted out. I wanted peace. That night I tried everything I could think of to get rid of it. I pulled out the ribbon again, this time cutting it into a dozen pieces and burning them in the sink. The flame hissed, black smoke curling up toward the ceiling. The smell was acrid, metallic, almost like blood. But when I looked down, the ashes were clean. Too clean. The paper beneath them untouched. I turned around to find the typewriter already reassembled, a new ribbon wound tight and smooth, the metal gleaming faintly under the kitchen light. And then it typed again, without hesitation. I froze. That name hit me like a fist. Damien, my ex, the one who humiliated me back in college, spreading rumors that destroyed my reputation, the one who laughed when I begged him to stop, the one who told everyone I was unstable. I hadn't thought about him in years, but the moment I saw his name, all the old anger surged back like bile. I shook my head, muttering, No, this isn't right." The typewriter typed again, each letter striking harder than the last. "He deserves it." I slammed my hands on the table. "Stop it!" I yelled. "You're not real!" The sound stopped instantly. The keys fell still. But later that night, I dreamt of him. Damien. Standing in a hallway. Smiling that same cruel smile. Then the sound of screeching tires, the flash of headlights, the echo of twisting metal. I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping. I ran to the living room, my legs barely holding me. The typewriter sat there, silent and still, but a new page waited in it. In the center of the sheet, typed perfectly in black ink, were two words, "It's time." I backed away slowly, shaking my head. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I wanted to scream, to throw it, to burn it, to smash it into dust. But I couldn't move. Because a part of me, a small, broken part I didn't want to admit existed, whispered something awful. Maybe it's right. And that thought scared me more than the typewriter ever could. I told myself I wouldn't give in again, but part of me wanted revenge. After that night, my dreams changed. They weren't nightmares anymore, not exactly. They were vivid, cinematic. I'd see Damien walking down the street, his face illuminated by neon signs, his arrogant smile catching the light just so. Then, without warning, a shadow would cross his path and the sound of keys clicking would echo in the distance, like the typewriter was writing the scene as it unfolded. I'd wake up breathless, my heart pounding in rhythm with that sound. It wasn't fear anymore, it was anticipation. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. Damien. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. But the name was there, clear as day, glowing on my screen like some cosmic joke. When I answered, his voice was smooth, familiar. "Brielle?" he said. "Been a long time." I couldn't speak. He chuckled softly. "Look, I'm in town for a few days. Thought we could catch up. No hard feelings, right?" The nerve. After everything he did to me, he wanted to catch up? I wanted to hang up right then. But instead, I heard myself say, "Sure. Coffee tomorrow?" The moment I ended the call, my chest filled with a strange mixture of dread and satisfaction. It was as if the typewriter had orchestrated the whole thing like it knew he'd reach out. That evening, I sat in front of it, a blank page loaded in the roller. I didn't plan to type, I just wanted to look at it, to see if it would move on its own. It didn't. It sat there, silent, patient. Finally, I said out loud, "He called me." "Nothing. I'm not going to do anything." I added quickly, as if to reassure myself. "Whatever this is, whatever you want, I'm not playing along." Still nothing. I exhaled, shaking my head. "You're just a machine," I muttered. The carriage snapped violently to the left. My breath caught in my throat. The keys struck the paper so fast it sounded like applause. When it stopped, the words stared back at me, sharp and deliberate. "He deserves it." I shoved the chair back, shaking my head. "No, not again. I'm done." But I didn't throw the paper away, this time. The next day, I met Damien at a café downtown, not my usual place. It was bright, open, full of people. I told myself that made it safe. He looked older, but that same smug charm lingered. "You look good," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "Still writing?" "Trying to," I said flatly. He leaned back, smirking. "You always were good with words, just not people." There it was, that same poisonous tone. The same cruel little dagger he'd always loved slipping between sentences. I smiled tightly. "And you still love hearing yourself talk, huh?" He laughed. "Touché." We made small talk for half an hour about work, about mutual friends, about life. But all I could think about was the typewriter's words, "He deserves it." When I got home, the typewriter was waiting. A blank sheet sat perfectly centered. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to. But I sat down anyway. I typed one sentence just to get it out of my system. "He laughed at me today." The response came instantly, "And you laughed back." I froze. "What do you want me to do?" I whispered. "Write." That night, I wrote a story. I told myself it was fiction. A story about a man who hurt a woman and got what he deserved. I wrote until my fingers ached, until the words blurred together. When I was done, I pulled the page out and set it aside. I felt lighter, cleansed. Maybe this was the typewriter's trick, maybe it just wanted me to confront the pain through words. But the next morning, my phone rang again. It was Harper. Her voice was trembling. "Brielle," she said. "Did you hear about Damien?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "What about him?" "He was mugged last night, beat up pretty bad. He's in the hospital." I sank to the floor, the phone slipping from my hand. When I looked up, the typewriter was waiting. The same page I'd written last night was still there, but one new line had been added, typed in darker ink, as if pressed harder. Story complete. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stared at it. My breath shallow. My mind blank. When Harper came over later that day, she could tell something was wrong. I told her about Damien, about the typewriter, about everything. She didn't laugh this time. She just looked at me with a mix of fear and pity. "Brielle," she said softly. "It's not a ghost. It's you. You're letting your anger write for you." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Because she was right. When she left, the silence in the apartment felt heavier than ever. I turned toward the typewriter and whispered, "No more." The keys didn't move. The carriage didn't shift. Then, slowly, painfully slow, it typed one word. "Harper," I screamed. "No, stop!" The keys froze mid-stroke. The page was half filled. The ink still wet. And that was the moment I realized the typewriter didn't just punish those who hurt me, it punished anyone who tried to stop it. For the first time, I screamed at it to stop. I'd never screamed at anything the way I screamed at that typewriter. It wasn't just rage, it was terror, grief, desperation, all tangled together. The sound ripped out of me before I even realized I was making it. I slammed my hand down on the keys, the metal biting into my palm, and shouted, "She's my friend, leave her alone." The machine didn't move. The silence afterward felt almost smug. The paper in the roller trembled slightly, the edge curling like it was breathing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, 3 slow clicks echoed through the room. "You do." That was all it said. Just those 2 words. I stared at them until my eyes burned. "Me?" I whispered. "What about me?" The keys hesitated, then struck again. "You do. You hurt. You pay." The chill that spread through me wasn't like anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't cold, it was hollow. Like every bit of warmth in me had been sucked out, leaving only the echo of something that used to be alive. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my chair. "No," I whispered. "You've got it wrong. I didn't do anything wrong." But somewhere deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I had done something wrong. I'd wanted Elena to stop laughing. I'd wanted Damien to suffer. I hadn't said it out loud, but I'd felt it, that poisonous spark of satisfaction. And now it knew. That night, the air in the apartment grew oppressive. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder. The walls seemed to breathe. Every shadow looked thicker than it should have been. I tried to leave, I really did. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and ran for the door. But when I twisted the knob, it wouldn't budge. I pushed harder, my shoulder slamming into the wood, but it was stuck. "Come on!" I shouted. "Please just let me out." Behind me, the faint click, clack began again. The sound was steady, deliberate. The typewriter was typing without me. I turned slowly, my pulse thrumming in my ears. The paper was feeding upward, letter by letter forming across the page. I couldn't read the words yet, but the rhythm of the keys was faster, almost frantic. When I finally stepped close enough, I felt bile rise in my throat. The same 2 words repeated over and over: Brielle Reed, Brielle Reed, Brielle Reed. My own name. Line after line, page after page. I grabbed the paper and ripped it out, but another sheet rolled into place instantly. The typing didn't stop. The machine kept feeding new paper, new lines, all with the same words, my name, printed hundreds of times, like a verdict being handed down. "Stop it!" I shouted. The carriage slammed violently to the left and right, the sound so loud it rattled the windows. I thought for a moment it might explode. Then it stopped suddenly, mid-motion. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I approached slowly, the floorboards creaking beneath me. The air smelled faintly of hot metal and ink. There was only one new word on the page now, typed in thick, uneven ink. "Confess." I stared at it, unable to move. My lips parted, but no sound came out. "Confess to what?" I whispered. The machine was silent. I sank to the floor, burying my face in my hands. My mind was spiraling, images flashing through my head like film reels. Elena's laughter, Damien's smirk, Harper's worried eyes. What was I supposed to confess? That I was glad they got hurt? That I wanted it? Maybe the typewriter wasn't punishing me for what I'd done, but for what I'd felt. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I sat there for hours, watching the shadows shift across the walls, waiting for it to move again. But it didn't. It just sat there. The word confess, staring at me like an accusation carved into stone. At some point, I must have drifted into a half-sleep. I dreamt I was standing in front of a crowd, a spotlight blinding me, a judge's voice echoing from somewhere unseen. "Tell them what you did." But when I opened my mouth, no words came out, only the sound of clattering keys. When I woke, the typewriter was gone. I froze, blinking in disbelief. My desk was empty. The papers were scattered across the floor, my notes torn to shreds. The typewriter wasn't anywhere in the room. Heart-hammering, I searched the apartment, under the bed, in the closet, behind the couch. Nothing. I almost cried from relief. Maybe it was finally over. Maybe it had just disappeared. Then I noticed the faint trail of ink smudges on the floor, tiny black marks leading toward the hallway. The trail stopped in front of the mirror. And there, faint but visible across the mirror's surface, written in streaks of black ink, were the words, "You can't hide from your own story." My knees went weak. I backed away slowly, my reflection trembling in the glass. Somewhere in the apartment, faintly, a single ding echoed the typewriter's bell. And I realized it hadn't disappeared at all. It had simply moved closer. I thought confession might free me, but I didn't know what it wanted me to confess to. The next morning, I couldn't look at the mirror. I draped a towel over it and left it that way, refusing to catch even a glimpse of myself. Every reflection felt like an accusation now. I could still see the words it had written across the glass burned into my memory. You can't hide from your own story. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, the room silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock. The typewriter sat in its place again on the desk, perfectly still, like it had never moved. I didn't remember bringing it back. At some point, I realized I couldn't keep running from it. I thought back to the word it had typed over and over. Confess. Maybe it was waiting for me to say something. To release whatever it believed I was holding inside. Maybe it would finally stop if I did. So I sat in front of it, took a deep breath, and rolled in a new sheet of paper. My fingers hovered over the keys. "I don't know what you want me to say," I whispered. "But I'm sorry." "Nothing. I'm sorry for hating them," I continued, my throat tightening. "Sorry for wanting them to hurt. Sorry for pretending I was innocent." The carriage shifted slightly. I could almost hear it breathing. "I know you think you're helping," I said, the words tumbling out now, messy and desperate. "But you're not. You're making things worse. Please, just stop." The typewriter didn't respond for a long time. Then, finally, it began to type. "Good. Keep going." My fingers shook as I continued, each word a confession I didn't know I had in me. I admitted how small I'd felt when they laughed, how satisfying it had been to see karma fall into place, how, for one brief moment, I'd felt powerful. I wrote until the page was full, then another, and another. The keys moved easily beneath my hands, almost guiding me, urging me to spill more. When I finished, there was a strange stillness in the room. The air felt lighter. I waited for it to move again, but it didn't. For the first time in weeks, the typewriter sat quiet and still. I dared to believe it might finally be over. When my phone rang, it was Harper. Her voice was cautious but kind. "Brielle, I've been thinking," she said. "I forgive you. I know you didn't mean for any of this to happen." The sound of her voice cracked something inside me. I started crying real, uncontrollable sobs that shook through me. "I just want it to stop," I said. "It will," she promised. "You can get rid of it. You don't need to keep punishing yourself." She was right. I couldn't live like this anymore. That night, I wrapped the typewriter in thick cloth, tied it with rope, and drove out to the lake just outside of town. The water was dark, still, and silent. The moon hung above it like an indifferent witness. I stood at the edge, the typewriter heavy in my arms. "This ends here," I whispered. "No more names. No more justice. No more of you." The water was freezing when I waded in waist-deep. I took one last breath and hurled the typewriter into the lake. It hit the surface with a hollow splash and disappeared beneath the black ripples. I waited. Nothing happened. No bubbles, no sounds. Just the quiet hush of the water reclaiming what wasn't meant to exist. When I got home, I felt empty but free. The apartment was quiet again. No clacking, no bells, no whispers. For the first time in what felt like forever, I slept without dreaming. Morning light spilled across the floor, soft and golden. I smiled weakly, the first real smile I'd managed in days. Then I noticed it. The window near my desk was open. A cold draft crept in, carrying the smell of lake water. My stomach twisted. I hadn't opened that window. And then I heard it. Drip, drip. I turned slowly. A puddle was forming on the floor beneath the desk. Water thick, murky, dripping from the edge. My heart started to race. No, it couldn't be. I took one step forward, and there it was. Sitting exactly where it always had, glistening under the morning sun, its metal frame slick with lake water. The same typewriter. The ropes were gone. The cloth, gone. The keys were damp, droplets sliding between them like sweat. A blank page sat in the roller, waiting. My knees nearly buckled. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My throat was tight, my mind a haze of disbelief. I forced myself to move closer, every step heavier than the last. When I reached the desk, I saw faint words beginning to appear, not typed this time, but rising slowly on the wet paper as if ink was bleeding through from underneath. You can't drown a story. The letters spread across the page, darkening, thickening. I backed away, shaking my head. No, I whispered. No, please. The carriage shifted, the bell chimed softly. A new page awaits. And before I could even move, before I could run or scream or tear it apart again, the typewriter began to type. And the worst part was, I realized I had nothing left to confess, only to continue. At that moment, I realized I could never destroy it, only understand it. I didn't touch the typewriter for 3 days. I couldn't. I covered it with a towel, shoved it into the corner, and tried to convince myself that what I'd seen at the lake was impossible. Machines didn't swim. They didn't come back from the bottom of the water, dripping and alive. It had to be my mind, my guilt, my exhaustion, my fear twisting reality until it made sense of the madness. But the smell of lake water never left my apartment. It clung to everything, the curtains, the floorboards, even my clothes. Every time I breathed, I could taste iron and algae, like I was still standing waist deep in that dark water. By the 4th, a day. The silence had started to feel heavier than the noise ever did, so I uncovered the typewriter again. It sat perfectly clean and dry now, as if it had never touched water. The keys gleamed under the morning light. The sheet of paper inside was blank, waiting. I took a shaky breath and said, "What are you?" The machine didn't move. The stillness was unbearable. Finally, I slid into the chair and rolled in a new sheet. My fingers hovered over the keys. "You're not my grandfather," I said softly. "Then who are you?" The carriage shifted slightly. A low click echoed through the room. Then it began to type. "Your words." I frowned. "My words?" "Yes. Your wrath. Your regret. Yours." My pulse quickened. "You mean, you're part of me?" "You called," I answered. The words hit like a physical blow. I thought back to all those nights I'd sat here, angry and humiliated, pounding my frustrations into the keys. Every insult I'd relived, every moment of shame I'd rewritten in stories where the cruel ones got what they deserved. I'd thought I was just venting, bleeding onto the page so I could feel lighter. But maybe I'd done something else. Maybe I'd given those words a shape, and now, that shape had a will. The air around me seemed to hum, faint but constant. I whispered, "If you're my words, then what do you want from me?" The keys struck with certainty. Balance. Balance? Right wrongs. Make them end. I shook my head violently. "No, I'm not doing this anymore. You can't keep deciding who deserves to suffer." The typewriter paused, then typed one slow, deliberate sentence. "I don't decide. You do." That silenced me. My throat tightened. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the page. Was that true? Was all of this just my own darkness dressed up in metal and ink? Had every accident, every coincidence, been my doing all along? I wanted to scream that it wasn't. That I was good. That I'd never meant for anyone to get hurt. But deep down, I knew there was something poisonous in me, something that had enjoyed the power. The typewriter began to hum again, faint vibrations rolling through the desk. My reflection in the metal rim looked warped, distant, almost smiling. I took a step back. "Stop it," I said. "Stop now." The keys clicked again, slow and rhythmic, spelling words that made my skin crawl. Stories don't stop. They finish. I lunged forward, ripping the paper from the roller, crumpling it into a ball and throwing it across the room. I'm not writing this anymore. The hum grew louder. The air around the machine shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. I thought I saw movement in its surface, a faint reflection that wasn't mine, something darker crouched behind the glint of light. I stumbled backward, my breath quick and uneven. You're not real, I whispered. You're just a machine. You're me. You said it yourself. You're just me. The typing stopped. For a moment, I thought it might be over. Then one last line appeared on the fresh sheet. If I'm you, then why are you afraid? My mouth went dry. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I turned and ran to the bathroom, gripping the sink to steady myself. My reflection stared back, pale, hollow-eyed, unfamiliar. My fingers were stained faintly with ink, though I hadn't touched the machine since yesterday. The ink stains darkened before my eyes, spreading across my fingertips like veins. I scrubbed them under the tap, but the black wouldn't come off. It just sank deeper into my skin. I looked up again and froze. My reflection was smiling. My lips weren't. I stumbled backward, crashing into the towel rack. When I looked again, the smile was gone, replaced by my own terrified face. I ran back to the living room, but the typewriter wasn't on the desk anymore. The towel I'd covered it with lay crumpled on the floor. The faint clicking sound came from the hallway now. I followed it slowly, cautiously, until I reached my bedroom. The typewriter sat on the bed. The sheet halfway rolled through. The words were already written. You can't hide from yourself, I whispered. What do you want me to do? It didn't type this time. Instead, the ribbon began to move without the keys, dragging black ink across the page in a jagged scrawl. Finish the list. My pulse thundered. There's no list, I shouted. There's no one left. But I knew I was lying the moment I said it. Because one name had come to mind, instantly mine. I sank onto the floor, shaking, clutching my head. I didn't want to finish anything. I didn't want to know what balance meant anymore. Then I heard it, a low mechanical whir, followed by the distinct ding of a new page rolling into place. And in that moment, a terrifying truth settled over me. If I couldn't destroy it, and I couldn't control it, maybe the only thing left was to become it. Everything around me began falling apart, my job, my sanity, my grip on reality. After that night, I stopped pretending to be normal. There was no point. Sleep came in fragments, work became impossible, and I barely left the apartment. My boss called twice, then stopped. I think he fired me, but I never checked the messages. None of it mattered. The typewriter had become the center of my world. Even when it was silent, it felt alive, like a heartbeat in the room. I could sense it pulsing faintly through the floorboards, through the air. It didn't need to type anymore to make itself known. I tried ignoring it. I stopped feeding it paper, unplugged every light near it, even turned the desk around so it faced the wall. But the sound would still come faint at first, then louder, until I couldn't tell if it was real or in my head. Every time I tried to sleep, I'd hear the soft tap of keys, followed by that small, perfect ding that now sounded more like mockery than punctuation. I started recording it with my phone, hoping to prove it was just my imagination. But every video came out distorted. The footage was nothing but static, and the audio was worse. The playback wasn't typing sounds, it was whispers. Dozens of them. Layered and soft. And in all of them, I could make out one word repeated over and over. Right. That was when I realized the typewriter didn't just want revenge anymore. It wanted continuation. One night, the whispers grew louder. They came from inside the walls, the pipes, even my own reflection. I sat on the floor, covering my ears, rocking back and forth, until I finally snapped. I dragged the typewriter into the middle of the room, screaming at it to stop, to leave me alone. It didn't respond. It just sat there blank, cold, waiting. Fine. I hissed. You want words? I'll give you words. I loaded a sheet of paper and began typing. I didn't think. I just let the words pour out. Names, stories, bits of memory. My childhood home, my grandfather's voice, Harper's smile, Damien's betrayal, Elena's laughter. Every letter struck like a heartbeat. The typewriter seemed to feed on it. The keys moved smoother, faster, almost joyful. Then, without my hands, it started typing on its own, adding to what I'd written. I leaned forward, horrified, as new names appeared. Not ones I knew, names of strangers, dozens of them. I froze. The words it typed next were clearer than ever. Stories live through others. I searched some of the names online. And I wish I hadn't. They were all real, all local. All recently deceased, accidents, mishaps, unexplained events. My stomach turned. Somehow the typewriter wasn't just tied to me anymore. It was writing its own stories and the world was bending to fit them. I tried running that night. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and rushed for the door. But before I could open it, every light in the apartment flickered and went dark. The only illumination left was the faint red glow from the typewriter's ribbon. It was typing again. I watched as each word formed slowly, painfully deliberate. If you leave, it ends with you. The air around me thickened. My breath came out shallow. Ends with me? I whispered. The reply came instantly. Stories need an author. That's when it hit me. The typewriter wasn't haunted. It wasn't possessed. It was me, my anger, my obsession, my need to make sense of pain through words. It was everything I'd buried, now clawing its way out through ink and steel. I didn't know if it wanted to destroy me or merge with me, maybe both. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a hammer, and stormed back to the desk. You want an ending? I shouted. Here's your ending. I brought the hammer down hard. The first strike cracked a key. The second bent the frame. The third shattered the platen. The machine shook under each hit. But even as metal bent and splintered, it typed. It kept typing. Stop. 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 Each word came faster, desperate, pleading. Then the hammer fell again and everything went silent. Smoke rose from the cracked metal. The ribbon fluttered in the air like a dying breath. I stood there panting, staring at what I'd done. The machine was mangled beyond repair. The desk was covered in splinters of ink and glass. For the first time in weeks, I felt relief. But it didn't last. The lights flickered once, twice, then came back on. And in the silence that followed, I heard it. The soft click of a single key being pressed. I turned toward the broken typewriter. Its frame was split open. The platen cracked clean in half. Yet, somehow, a single key was moving. Click. It pressed again, faint but clear. Click. Then came the ding. The sound echoed through the apartment like a laugh. I took a step closer, and my blood ran cold. Even though the ribbon was torn, even though the carriage was bent, there were fresh words, forming across the ruined paper, not typed cleanly, but carved deep, almost gouged into the page. You can't kill a story. And below that, written faintly as if by a trembling hand, was another line. You are the story. The last light bulb above me flickered, then burst, showering the desk in sparks. I stumbled back, my heart hammering, every nerve screaming that I needed to run. But I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. Because the final sound that came from the typewriter wasn't the click of keys. It was the faint, steady rhythm of breathing. And when I realized it wasn't mine, I knew the story wasn't ending, it was rewriting itself. I didn't want to be next, so I kept writing. I told myself I was writing to survive. That's how I justified it. Every keystroke became a heartbeat, every paragraph another breath. As long as I kept typing, the typewriter stayed quiet. It was like feeding a monster to keep it tame. Days bled into nights without distinction. I stopped answering the phone. Stopped eating properly. The curtains stayed closed, My apartment dim except for the lamplight that spilled across the desk. The typewriter waited, patient and still, until my fingers hovered over it, then it came alive, obedient only to motion. At first, I tried writing something innocent. A short story about a girl who finds an old machine that helps her heal instead of harm. I wanted to test it to see if goodness could quiet the darkness. For a while, it seemed to work. The typewriter typed gently, the rhythm soft and steady. The words on the page flowed effortlessly, like I was finally in control again. I almost started to believe the curse had lifted. Then the comments started appearing. I had been posting some of my work online, under a pseudonym, a way to vent, to feel like my words still mattered. But suddenly, people began reacting differently. "Your stories feel real," they said. "Too real." Others called them prophetic, disturbing. One person even messaged, saying a scene in my story matched an accident that had just been reported in the news. I brushed it off as coincidence until it happened again. And again. Each time I wrote a fictional tragedy, it mirrored something in the real world days later. A man falling from scaffolding, a woman drowning in her own bathtub, a small fire in a downtown café. The details matched my words almost line for line. I tried to stop. I told myself I wouldn't touch the typewriter again. But the silence that followed was unbearable. The whispers came back first, low and indistinct, like murmurs in another room. Then came the sound of typing, faint but insistent even when I wasn't near the desk. The machine didn't just want me to write, it demanded it. The first night I resisted. The walls pulsed faintly with vibration. The second night, my lamp shattered. On the third night, my reflection in the window began moving before I did. So I gave in. I sat down, loaded a sheet, and began to write. I didn't even think about what I was saying, I just let the words flow. The story that came out was darker than anything I'd ever written. A story about a woman whose words bled into reality, whose imagination shaped the world around her, destroying everything she touched. Halfway through, I realized I wasn't writing fiction anymore. I was documenting myself. And yet, the more I wrote, the more powerful it felt. Each sentence seemed to hum through the air, vibrating with energy. I could feel the story taking shape around me, invisible threads weaving through my apartment, connecting me to something vast and unseen. At some point, I stopped fearing it. The fear turned into something else, a kind of devotion. The typewriter wasn't a curse anymore. It was a calling. It had chosen me. When Harper finally managed to reach me, I barely recognized her voice. "Brielle," she said softly, "you need help, please. You're scaring me." I smiled to myself. "I'm fine, Harper. You don't understand, it's working now. My writing matters." "Working?" she repeated. "You haven't left your apartment in weeks. People are worried." "People?" I laughed. "You mean readers. They're not worried, they're hungry. They want more." She hesitated. "Brielle, what are you talking about?" I looked at the typewriter. Its carriage twitched slightly, as if acknowledging the question. "They need the story," I said. "And so do I." "Then at least tell me when it ends," she whispered. I looked at the page, at the half-finished paragraph. "When I stop," I said. "But if I stop, I die." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, softly, "That's not you talking." Before I could respond, the call disconnected. The phone in my hand felt heavier than it should have. I stared at the dark screen. The reflection of my face warped and distant. I turned back to the typewriter. It had typed something while I wasn't looking. "She doesn't believe you," I whispered. "No. She's just scared." The reply came instantly. "She should be." I ripped the page out, shaking. "You're not going to touch her. Do you hear me? You're not doing anything to her." The keys didn't move again. But that night, the machine began typing on its own while I slept. The sound was faint, but rhythmic like breathing. When I finally dared to look, the page was filled with a single line repeated over and over. "Every story has an ending." The next morning, I logged into my writing account. A new post was published, one I didn't remember uploading. It was a story titled The Friend Who Tried to Stop Me, and as I scrolled through it, my blood turned to ice, because every word described Harper. Her job, her voice, even the way she said my name when she was worried. The story ended with a single sentence. She never called again. I looked toward the typewriter. The bell chimed softly, perfectly timed with the end of the story. And for the first time, I didn't know if the sound meant completion or death. I finally understood the story wasn't fiction anymore. The moment I finished reading that post, something inside me fractured. The typewriter wasn't creating stories anymore. It was recording them as if I were living a script that had already been written. I tried to call Harper, over and over. No answer. Each ring stretched longer, emptier, until the line went dead with a hollow click. I texted her. I emailed her. Nothing. That's when I felt it again, that low, throbbing hum pulsing through the apartment. The typewriter's heartbeat. I turned toward it slowly, dread creeping up my spine. A fresh page was already in the roller, the top edge trembling as if caught in an invisible breeze. I didn't touch it, but the carriage moved slow, deliberate. Final chapter. No, I whispered. No, we're not done. Every story ends. I stepped closer. You don't get to decide that. The typewriter paused. Then the ribbon twitched, and new words appeared. Something snapped in me. I grabbed the machine by its metal frame, the edges cutting into my hands, and threw it to the floor. It hit hard, the sound sharp and final, but the keys kept twitching, tapping against the wood like an insect refusing to die. I grabbed my hammer again, swinging wildly. The first blow bent the carriage. The second cracked the keys. The third smashed through the platen. I kept hitting it until my arms ached, until metal shards littered the floor and the ribbon hung loose like entrails. Then everything went still. The air was heavy and silent. For a moment, I thought it was over. That I'd finally won. Then, behind me, every light in the apartment flickered at once. The temperature dropped. The walls groaned. The air vibrated with a deep hum not from the typewriter, but from inside me. I turned. Slowly, my breath clouding in front of me. The typewriter's remains were shifting, the pieces dragging themselves together with metallic screeches. Screws spun back into place. Bent metal straightened with wet, cracking sounds. The ribbon wound itself tight again, glistening with fresh black ink. When it was whole again, it looked different. Newer. Sleeker. Like it had never been broken. It typed without hesitation. The writer cannot kill her own words. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. Stop, please. The story is you. I screamed. Grabbed the nearest thing, a chair, and hurled it at the desk. The impact shattered the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, I thought I'd blinded it, silenced it. But then the typing resumed, louder, faster. Sparks from the broken lamp flickered against the walls, illuminating flashes of black ink spraying across the paper. When I leaned closer, the words burned like fire into my brain. I am what you made. I am your words, your pain, your truth. You wanted them to suffer. And they did. I fell to my knees. I didn't mean it. The typing stopped. Then, after a long pause, yes, you did. A tremor ran through the floor. Papers lifted from the ground, swirling around me like a storm. The words on every page I'd ever written began to move, twisting and crawling across the paper, forming new sentences. You write. I breathe. You stop. I end. I clutched my head, tears spilling down my face. Then I'll stop. I'll stop writing. The typewriter's bell dinged, a cruel punctuation mark. Then so will you. The wind around me intensified. The apartment groaned as if the building itself was part of the story now, as if the walls were reading my thoughts. The pages that filled the room began to ignite one by one, burning without flame, the words dissolving into smoke that formed sentences in the air. The smoke curled in front of me, shaping itself into a reflection, my own face staring back. Only, it wasn't me. Her eyes were darker. Her mouth curved in a knowing smile. She looked complete. I stumbled back. Who are you? The reflection tilted her head. The author, she said, but the voice didn't come from her lips. It came from the typewriter. The machine typed one final word, hello. The reflection stepped out of the smoke, her edges sharp and human now. She was solid, real, another me. She wore the same ink-stained hands, the same tired eyes, the same trembling smile I'd seen in my own reflection weeks ago. I backed away until I hit the wall. You're not real, I whispered. She smirked. Neither are you. I looked down the floor. Beneath me was covered in ink. It had spread from the desk, crawling outward in long black veins that pulsed faintly like they were alive. I could feel it seeping into my shoes, my skin. The doppelganger stepped closer, her shadow merging with mine. I wanted to run, to scream, but all I could do was watch as she leaned down toward the typewriter and began to type. Her fingers moved faster than mine ever could. The sound filled the room, click-clack, ding, faster, louder, relentless. And with every word she typed, I felt something pulling at me. My body growing lighter, my thoughts slower. Stop, I begged. Please stop. She didn't even look at me. You had your turn, she said softly. Now it's mine. And the last thing I remember before everything went black was watching myself finish the story. It looked exactly like me, but colder, more determined. When I opened my eyes, everything was still. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the faint scent of ink and smoke. My head throbbed. The last thing I remembered was her, the other me, typing, smiling, finishing what I had started. I was lying on the floor, my cheek pressed against something cool and metallic. When I pushed myself up, I saw it, the typewriter, sitting perfectly on the desk, again. Not a single scratch, not a drop of ink out of place. It looked new, untouched. But I wasn't alone. She was there sitting in my chair, her back to me. The rhythmic clicking of the keys filled the silence. Click-clack, ding. I froze. Her hands moved exactly like mine, down to the twitch in the left pinky I'd had since childhood. But her movements were more deliberate, more confident, like she'd always belonged there. I whispered, "Stop." She didn't. "Stop!" I screamed. The typing halted. The carriage slid back to the left with a soft click. Slowly, she turned around. It was my face, my body, my voice when she finally spoke. But her eyes, they were darker. Not black, not empty, but full. Too full. Like she could see everything I'd ever written. Every thought I'd ever tried to bury. "Who are you?" I demanded. Though I already knew. She smiled faintly. "You know who I am, Brielle." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You're not me." Her tone was calm, measured, almost kind. "I am the version of you who stopped pretending, the one who didn't apologize for feeling angry, for wanting justice, for finishing the story." "I didn't finish anything," I snapped. "You stole it." "I completed it," she corrected. "You kept hesitating. You were afraid of your own words. You wanted to be forgiven. I don't need forgiveness." I felt a surge of rage rise inside me, the same heat that had fueled every story, every confession, every word the typewriter had ever drawn out of me. "Give it back," I said, my voice trembling. "It's mine." She tilted her head slightly. "Is it? You made me with your words. You wrote me into existence. And now you want to erase me? That's not how stories work, Brielle. Once written, they live." "I didn't write this," I shouted. "You're not supposed to be real." Her eyes softened, almost pitying. "Oh, I'm real. Just not here." "That mean?" "You think you're in your apartment," she said, standing slowly. "But you're not. You're in me." The walls around us began to shift, the colors draining away until everything was shades of gray. The windows dissolved into blackness, the air humming with faint whispers, voices layered over one another. speaking fragments of sentences I'd written in the past. I recognized them. They were my stories, all of them, reciting themselves in an endless loop. "What is this?" I whispered. "The inside of your words," she said simply. "Every lie you've told. Every truth you buried. You built this place." I stumbled backward, my back hitting something solid, the door to my apartment. I reached for the knob, but it wouldn't turn. "You can't leave," she said softly. "You left me for years, remember? Ignored me. Starved me. Now it's my turn to write." She sat back at the typewriter, her fingers gliding over the keys again. The words filled the page faster this time, the sound sharper, hungrier. "Stop it!" I screamed, running toward her. I grabbed her shoulders and tried to pull her away, but my hands passed right through her like she was made of smoke and light. I fell forward, my palms slamming into the desk. The typewriter's keys were cold beneath my fingers, but the paper was warm, pulsing faintly, as if alive. When I looked down, I saw what she was writing. She fights her reflection, still believing she can win. Still pretending she's real. I stumbled back, horrified. "No," I whispered. "You're not writing this." "I am." The machine dinged. She looked up at me, her smile sharp and knowing. "Then prove it." I lunged for the paper, grabbed it, and tore it from the roller. The words kept appearing on it even as I held it in my hands, line after line forming on the torn page in black ink. "She tears the page. It doesn't matter. She's already written." I dropped it and backed away. The floor, beneath me, rippled like liquid, pages spreading out from beneath my feet like water. Every step I took, new sentences appeared, fragments of my own thoughts, confessions, fears. "You can't have my life," I whispered. She stood, the shadows bending around her. "Your life was the story, Brielle. You gave it to me the moment you started writing. Then what happens to me?" She smiled, that cold, confident smile that I once thought I'd wear when I finally found peace. "You fade," she said. I felt it then, my hands trembling, dissolving at the edges, the ink stains on my fingers spreading outward. My reflection on the glossy metal of the typewriter warped and stretched until there were two faces, hers and mine, blending into one. I tried to scream, but my voice broke apart into echoes. "You were right," she said softly, reaching out to touch my fading cheek. "Stories don't end, they just change authors." The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was her sitting back down, rolling a new page into the typewriter. And then, my own voice distant, hollow, whispering through her lips. Chapter 14. When I woke up, I was in a hospital, but nothing felt right. The world came back to me in fragments. The steady beep of a monitor, the faint antiseptic sting in the air, the muted shuffle of shoes on linoleum. My eyelids were heavy, as if stitched together by sleep itself. When I finally forced them open, all I saw was white, the ceiling, the sheets, the gown I was wearing. Everything sterile, everything still. A nurse stood beside me, adjusting the IV drip. She glanced down and smiled politely. "Good morning, Miss Brielle. You're lucky to be alive." Her words hit like an echo in a cavern. Alive. I tried to sit up, but pain flared through my body, sharp and unfamiliar. My voice cracked as I asked, "What happened?" "You were found unconscious in your apartment," she said gently. "Firefighters pulled you out just before the flames reached your room." "Fire?" The word felt foreign on my tongue. She nodded. "There was a blaze. Electrical, they think. You inhaled a lot of smoke." I blinked slowly. Fire. Smoke. My mind tried to conjure the memory, but all I saw were flashes, glowing embers swirling around pages, the typewriter's keys glowing like coals, the other me leaning over the desk, typing through the chaos. Is anyone else hurt?" I asked weakly. The nurse frowned slightly. "No, you were alone." Alone. That word pierced deeper than it should have. A few hours later, a police officer came by. He stood at the edge of my bed, flipping through his notebook. "Miss Reed," he began. "You're sure you don't remember anything about the fire?" I shook my head. "No. I was writing, and then my voice trailed off. Everything went dark. He exchanged a look with the nurse before saying, "We found a melted typewriter near your desk." It was the only thing still warm when we arrived, even after the flames were out. The hairs on my arms rose. "Still warm?" He nodded. "Odd, right? The rest of the apartment was ashes, but that thing..." He stopped himself. "Anyway, you should rest. We'll contact you if we need a statement." When he left, I stared at the ceiling. The words "still warm" replaying in my head like a heartbeat. That night, I dreamt of typing, but not my own hands. Hers. The other Brielle. Her movements were graceful. Certain. She smiled as she wrote, whispering words I couldn't hear. The dream felt less like memory and more like observation. When I woke, the room was dark, except for the faint glow from the hallway light. A shadow flickered across the door, long, deliberate, human. "Hello?" I called softly. No response. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding. The curtain beside my bed shifted slightly, as if brushed by unseen fingers. Then I heard it faint, but unmistakable. Click-clack, ding. The sound came from the tray at the foot of my bed. My blood ran cold. I reached for the call button, but stopped when I saw what was sitting there. A folded piece of paper, slightly charred at the edges, my name typed neatly across the top. My fingers shook as I unfolded it. There were only 3 words: the end or beginning. I dropped it, my pulse roaring in my ears. I pressed the call button frantically, but no one came. When I looked up, my reflection in the window caught my eye, and for a second, I didn't recognize her. The woman staring back looked like me, but her eyes were different, darker, sharper. She smiled faintly, a smile that felt practiced. The door opened suddenly, and Harper stepped inside. I gasped in relief. "Harper!" She stopped mid-step, her expression freezing. Her eyes darted to the reflection, then back to me. "Brielle?" she said cautiously. "Yes," I said quickly, desperate. "It's me." But she didn't move closer. She stared like she was seeing a stranger wearing my skin. "That's not Brielle," she whispered. The room tilted around me. "What are you talking about?" Her voice trembled. "Your eyes, your voice, it's wrong." I swung my legs over the bed, ignoring the pain in my ribs. "Harper, please, it's me, I'm alive." She backed toward the door, her hand trembling. "You died in that fire," she said softly. "They told me you were gone. I came to say goodbye." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm right here." But even as I said it, I felt something crawling up my arms, faint black lines, like veins made of ink, spreading from beneath my fingernails. I stared in horror. "Harper, help me!" Her eyes widened. "God," she whispered. "What did you do?" The nurse appeared in the doorway, startled by Harper's voice. "Is everything all right in here?" Harper didn't answer. She turned and fled down the hall. The nurse rushed to my side, trying to steady me. "Miss Reed, please lie back down." But I couldn't. I looked down again, the ink was gone. My hands were clean. The nurse looked confused as she followed my gaze. I started. "Shh," she said gently. "You need rest." She adjusted the monitor and left, closing the door behind her. I sat there, shaking, staring at my reflection in the window again. This time the other Brielle smiled wider and lifted her hands. Her fingertips were black with ink. And then, faintly, beneath the hum of the hospital lights, I heard it. Click-clack, ding. I looked down at my hands again. A faint shimmer of black spread across my skin. My heartbeat steadied, my fear fading into something else, something quiet, composed, almost serene. The typewriter's rhythm grew louder in my mind, echoing through every thought. I picked up the charred paper from the tray and traced the words with my fingertip. The end or beginning. A small, knowing smile curved on my lips. I could almost feel the keys beneath my fingers again. The story wasn't over. It had just found its new author. And this time, I would make sure it was written perfectly.